Good afternoon. You're watching AB Live or COVID Live as we call it right now. Today we are going to be talking about e-commerce in the time of COVID-19, and joining us remotely, of course, we have Alistair Burton from Criteo. Thank you so much for joining us, Alistair.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Right, so I think I'm going to start with this, especially for the benefit of the viewers who don't know about this yet. But what exactly is Criteo?
So Criteo, there's slightly different pronunciations everywhere, but
I'm sorry.
the one we use is...
It's Criteo.
So Criteo is an ad tech company that focuses on driving customer engagement for brands and retailers with personalized dynamic advertising. Mm-hmm. So it all sounds very technical, but what it essentially means to your listeners is essentially basically being able to understand user habits online, how people are using the internet, and then helping brands achieve their goals and objectives, whatever they are, be it engaging with their customers or getting them to pushing particular products that they may be interested in buying.
So basically you're providing services to the e-commerce brands in the market right now.
Exactly. Not only e-commerce. E-commerce is a big part of it, but e-commerce, lots of different brands and marketing services and advertisers.
Right, so I think today we are going to be focusing more on the e-commerce side of things. But one of the first questions I do have for you is, everyone's talking about the pandemic being a win-win situation for the e-commerce, but then I've got my doubts there. So has it really been the case when it comes to what's happening right now? Has it really been a 100% win situation for all e-commerce brands and platforms?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard it be called win-win yet. In terms of very specific, in terms of e-commerce, it is obviously very positive, but it depends on the exact vertical in your sector you're looking at. So obviously, if you look at something like travel, a huge amount of travel is purchased online, and with lockdowns and travel restrictions, this is one area that has been hit hard. Right. Now, if you're talking, let's say, retail e-commerce, there is significantly more of a positive impact, and I just want to be very careful to use that word positive, because I know it's hit a lot of people economically and financially very hard. But in terms of servicing your customers and listening to customer needs, if everyone is in lockdown, and as I'm sure we both are, kind of working from home, being a teacher from home, living at home, cooking at home, all of these different things, the way you interact with the world and people needs to change. And I think one very big part of that is actually buying, be it, your day-to-day shopping, clothes, or variety of other things. And it's just kind of given on the online environment or the e-commerce environment more of an opportunity to engage with customers.
Right, for sure. I just need to remind our viewers that we are taking questions from you today. So if you do have any questions, just post them in the comments below or send it to us across our social media sites, and we will be taking it up with Alistair. So Alistair, I think pre-pandemic, there was this entire conversation, especially in the region, about if e-commerce is going to kill the brick and mortar industry. And we did have the major brick and mortar industries and malls, etc., saying that, it's not going to happen. People really want the experience of it, and it's always a 360-degree perspective when it comes to shopping and retail. Right now, would you say that they'd still have the same opinion on the subject and the same take on the subject?
Yeah, I would love to hear those conversations when they had them before, and I would love to hear them again tomorrow to see how they've changed. Yeah. From my point of view, I don't think these things are black and white, and it's not totally e-commerce, and at the same time, it's not totally offline. These things are, everyone has 101 different sides of their personality, so it's not one size fits all. What I would say directly to answer the question is in terms of the trends. So beforehand and today, the trends are the same. So e-commerce or online is providing an avenue to engage with your customers, and that this is increasing. Now, with COVID on top of that, the opportunity for this to increase at a faster pace has happened. But still, some of those trends remain the same. People will want to engage with brands or shops in the way that they feel comfortable with. And some of these trends would be the experience is becoming ever more important. So that was always the case. I think it still remains to be the case, but obviously there are some fundamental changes underneath. So for example, if you want to go and experience a particular clothes or shop or food and beverage, the experience you would get today is very different from what you would have got 3 or 4 months ago, and will probably be different in 3 or 4 months' time.
For sure. So at this point, obviously consumer habits are changing and consumer behavior is changing rapidly. So what is it that you have noticed as Criterio just bringing it to different brands?
Yeah, so the obvious one is the increase, the sudden and the rapid increase in interest.
Right.
So overall, there has been an increase in traffic, which is up around 70%. I mean, that is specifically a US stat.
Right.
So online traffic has increased by around 70%, which is absolutely huge. More customers are planning to buy. So around 50% of customers are planning to spend more online. And this is specific to COVID. Now we've got some slightly different stats around Eid and Ramadan. So more customers are they are spending more time online. They are planning to spend more online.
Yeah.
And when they are spending, they are more likely to stay with brands that they haven't previously engaged before. So 4 out of 5 shoppers are planning to stay with a brand that they've newly engaged with in this COVID period. So from a brand perspective, it really creates this opportunity and illustrates some of the trends that I mentioned before in terms of this is the opportunity to reach out to your customers, because if you can't engage with them physically, within that digital environment is more of an opportunity to do so. So from that perspective, going back to your question, is it win-win? So from online retailers, yes, that is a big win.
It is a big win. But again, people do come from different purchasing power right now, with the salary cuts,
100%.
job losses, and people having a more saving mentality at this point. Are they still willing to spend as much as they were before?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because obviously we've got the pandemic, the COVID pandemic going on, and then on top of that we've got Ramadan. So historically, we would normally see a spike in sales towards Ramadan.
Yeah.
And obviously we have seen exactly the same this year. The only slight difference is we don't know what is how to pull out the difference between the Ramadan spending and COVID spending, because obviously there's multiple different issues going on.
Sure.
Overall, people have been planning to spend more. So from a survey, 72% of people are planning to spend more online during Ramadan Eid.
Right.
Some of the key categories that will see that the benefit or the spike include perfume, beauty, clothes, and fashion. But obviously this year there's been a significant increase in the ones that we can pull up, let's say, are more likely to be down to COVID. For example, food and beverage, spending on food and beverage has increased by 82%. Toys and games, I have 2 kids myself. I found myself being a teacher, homeschooling my kids, which has been a pleasure, but it's been an interesting challenge at times as well, as I'm sure. Many people can resonate with that. I've seen a big increase at around 58%.
Okay.
And it's interesting, a lot of this actually really kind of shows people's what they are actually up to at home and the challenges they are going through.
For sure, and again, we're just coming at the back of Eid, so obviously Eid expenditure has been really high traditionally, especially in this region. Did you see that again this year? Was that the same trend that continued?
It is the same trend, but as I say, that some of the numbers have been kind of mixed up with the overall COVID. So we are seeing the same trend, but some of the numbers are mixed with COVID. So it's a bit more tricky to tell out what's what. So we've got to say from a survey perspective and what's actually happening. There's 2 kind of sides to it. Overall, I think from a survey point of view, around 79% of the people in the UAE that we surveyed in the UAE were planning to buy gifts for Eid. And obviously, one of the big areas that we see as we approach Eid, we see a huge spike. Normally, we see a huge spike in travel bookings, whereas in this year, obviously, that doesn't exist. And the other one that we can put out as well is in terms of the demographics that you just mentioned. So in terms of demographics, the group that has seen the highest propensity to buy is millennials. So those born between 81 and 94.
Right. Why do you think that is? Is it because they are the ones who are actually online and they're the ones who are tech savvy, so they know how to use these platforms?
I think it's a mixture. I think it's both. Yes, that is true. But you'd say in terms of time online, the younger generation does definitely spend more time online and is engaged in more different online platforms.
Mm-hmm.
I would do it more from an economic perspective. I would say my perspective is more from an economic perspective. These are the ones that are more likely to be further into their career and have more disposable income.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, understood. So I was just reading, so globally I think you've also launched a retail ad platform. So does that again apply to this region, and are you also doing more with regards to promotions, marketing, sales, etc.?
Yeah, so from an app perspective, this is let's say on a platform perspective, so how people engage with different devices.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, this region, Middle East and Africa, sees a far higher activity within an app perspective. So people spend more time on apps, they're more engaged with apps, they spend more on apps than a lot of other regions, and it's a lot more aligned with the likes of Singapore or South Korea or China, versus other markets such as US and Europe, which actually have lower engagement on apps. So this is definitely something that's very specific to this region, and I think a lot of this kind of falls into smartphone usage, and the number of smartphones that people own is some of the highest in the world from a per capita point of view.
But what are the main channels that the brands rely on to publish their ads?
So it comes down to the customer really, and it depends on where the customer is. So when you're talking about the channels, you're talking about the actual devices. So overall, mobile, be it app or web, hold the majority. So that's where people are spending the majority of time. And this is a trend that's been going back many years, and is increasing.
Yeah, no, I mean, is it Facebook? Is it social media? Are people actually relying on TikTok now? But yeah, in terms of the channel, that's what I meant.
Yeah, okay. So that point of view, yes. So 100%. So I mean, each country is different, each audience is different, each demographic is different. TikTok is an interesting one that's kind of come up, and it's become a very big platform in the last couple of years. And I think a lot of these trends are down to be it TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, etc.
Yeah.
If you look at the different audiences behind it, and it's definitely, particularly the newer platforms, it's the younger audiences that are that are living on these platforms more and recording their lives on these platforms more. And then this is shown later down the line. So in terms of the overall numbers, I think we'll start to see these kind of platforms have a more dominant presence in the years to come as the kind of, let's say, the older generations begin to use them more and more.
For sure. And at this point, I think a lot of companies are talking about cost cutting, and they are doing a lot of cost cutting. As an expert in the field, would you recommend cutting down on digital marketing expenditure? Is that something that they should consider, or should they invest more in that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. From my perspective, I mean, I worked in communications for over 15 years, and I would actually say now is the time to invest in digital engagement, because people are online more, and people don't physically have the option to go and engage with customers in a physical environment.
Right.
So now is the time to definitely do that. But the one thing I would say is I do understand that, let's say, from an economic point of view, there is challenges, and it depends on how a business is run. I would say it makes more sense to actually invest now and build out that longer term reputation and build out that stronger ties with your customers, that will pay at a later point in time, because they will have a stronger relationship with the brand. So that's very strongly, I would say that. But I do understand that it is difficult times, and let's say, cash flow and the number of, how people would be traditionally getting paid is changing right in front of our eyes, and it's never been so fast. I mean, one of the other trends that we've seen is how customers are actually buying. So interestingly, this region saw a huge number of cash-based transactions, far higher than other parts of the world. Whereas
really? Even now?
No, that's what I was going to say. Okay. 3 months ago, significantly higher. But now one of the biggest changes we've seen is people are paying in cashless options, so online transactions or through Apple Pay, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think Noon had announced that as well, their partnership with Visa in terms of contactless pay, cashless transactions. Some of the bigger players in this region are definitely doing that. But at this point, what would you say are the main challenges that the major e-commerce platforms are facing?
In terms of the challenges, it's very similar to what we just mentioned, actually. So if we talked about, let's say, the difficulties from an offline or a physical store point of view, obviously an e-commerce platform, if you're buying on an e-commerce platform, you still need to deliver the goods. So you still have the challenges of logistics in terms of actually bringing the produce to the market. So obviously with the travel industry that's been so heavily challenged, it's actually more of a challenge to actually bring products to market. And then from a logistical point of view, that last mile delivery, actually getting it to customers. And so I think the biggest challenge is basically the sudden increase in demand over the past 3 months. So businesses have had to change the way they work, not only because there's increased demand, but also there's a new way of working, be it social distancing. And then how does this work from a practical perspective? Whether you're ordering your lunch on a food delivery app, let's say the way that the delivery person will interact with you has changed massively, as well as like from a warehousing point of view, etc.
For sure, but I think right now one of the other challenges that a lot of brands are facing is with regards to supply chain and broken supply chains. One of the reasons being, again, with all the travel restrictions, a lot of their products that were imported from other countries, that is no longer available. So do you think there's going to be, again, a change in the way that people are selling their goods and manufacturing their goods?
Yeah, it's very true. So I think that there has been a decline in the amount of products made, and the interesting one is in terms of actually China. Obviously, is effectively the factory of the world, building so many things, and it's imported globally. And the decline from that perspective is going to hit everyone globally in terms of what's available. From a marketing perspective, I think it's increasingly important to make sure that obviously what you're marketing, you are confident that you can deliver to market. So I have had experience. I've ordered something a couple of weeks ago, expecting it a certain delivery time, and then obviously it didn't arrive in the time that I was expecting. So I think it's especially important for advertisers or e-commerce brands to make sure that they can live up to their promises. And that makes sure that let's say from a stock point of view, that they are confident that they can go out and deliver it. Otherwise, it does create a customer, and not so good customer experience if you're ordering something you think it takes X days and it actually takes X days plus, you know.
For sure. So I think you might be the best person to answer this question, because you're both doing retail, offline retail and online retail. So at this point, what would you say should physical stores do to make up for the lost traffic of the last few months? Where should they start?
I think the first one is transforming the physical space. And some of this is actually built on insights that we've seen in other markets that are a little bit further ahead in terms of that pandemic curve. So transforming that physical space to enable people to come and experience whatever it is, the brand, particular items of clothes or products, etc. So transforming the space, that space, so it can be used within a socially distanced economy, and whether it's the number of people in the shops or how you're actually interacting with the brand and the staff themselves. And then I think digital also comes into that as well. So, for example, there's another trend that went on before, click and collect. So you buy online and you collect it in person. But again, thinking about that social distancing, what can you do to minimize that risk of that face-to-face relationship, and what can you do to maximize what the customer wants? I think it's a fascinating world that we are living in. Let's say from a psychologist's point of view. I know myself personally, I'm really missing actually going and sitting and having a coffee and talking to people and seeing them face to face. And I think these are the challenges that brands need to get through. But I think the other one I would say is that and I'm no virologist or anything like that, but it is where we are today. It's changed so much in the course of 3 months. That's not to say that it won't continue to change. So I think we're going to see a huge amount of innovation. I think we already are seeing a huge amount of innovation. How companies and how businesses and how people are adapting to this new normal as it's become known.
For sure, the new normal, the new reality, of course. But one thing that brands are at this point relying on is on customer loyalty and trust, and that is sort of what has kept them going, especially in the case of the smaller businesses, the SMEs, etc. Are you going to see a change in the way loyalty programs are done and a sort of revolution in how it was conducted before?
I don't think there will be anything. I don't think there'll be a significant change. The only area I'd say there would be is it will accelerate and it will become even more important. I mean, this is a trend that has been going on for a number of years. Loyalty programs to be able to create a deeper and stronger bond with your customers. Sure. I think it becomes even more important because effectively, the one channel which traditionally was the major channel, being that physical or face-to-face environment, is less available today. And so it needs to be made up in other ways. But developing that strong brand relationship is absolutely essential, and understanding what your customers are doing, how they are interacting, taking that feedback and adapting your product, your solution, your marketing is essential to be able to do that. And again, digital plays a huge role in this area.
Right, and finally, I just have one question more, which is, do you think consumption habits are permanently going to change? And by this I mean the way we've been consuming as human beings has been, with regards to overconsumption, higher carbon footprints, etc. We've seen what's happened in the last few months, and it's been sort of a reality check for a lot of us in terms of, how we were consuming things we didn't need and we kept overbuying, etc. Do you think all of that is going to change in the grander scheme of things?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I think a lot of it already has changed. I know I can speak for myself very, very personally in terms of, like I mentioned before, having kids at home or becoming a teacher or the way that you're shopping. I think these things have already changed. In terms of that bigger kind of, let's say, sociological question of consumption and the volume of consumption and the need versus want, I think this is a fascinating area. And I think there's been in terms of the carbon footprint and the impact on the carbon footprint, there's a lot of, let's say, unexpected that have come from it. Yeah. I personally don't know if it is going to change. It could simply be that it will, it continues, but effectively it moves more online. But then you've got the kind of the question, the argument of the positivity and the negativity of these changes. And there are definitely some positives in terms of some of the points that you just mentioned.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Alistair, for joining us, and thanks for those valuable insights. We've definitely got a lot of information on the e-commerce and the wider retail market from this region.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And thank you for watching AB Live. We will be back again next Tuesday.